Hello, you have a prepaid call from
Dennis L. Reader,
an inmate at Kansas Department of Corrections. To accept this call, press or say.
When you went before Judge Waller and he asked you to talk about the details of all the crimes, what were you thinking? What was that like for you?
well, I guess I want to be truthful. I wanted to let people know what happened, and people were aghast that I would go like that. Whoa, it's like I was putting on a show or something.
Were you feeling anything when that was happening?
I just unloaded. Maybe it was a way of a pressure valve, I guess.
Okay. Put your story out there.
The main thing is to help people like yourself understand the dark mind. You know, I lived a normal life. You got to have a real dark mind. And that's the $64,000 question. Why did I do that?
So your fantasy life was more important to you than your real life, it sounds like.
Well, I guess in a degree it was. The fantasy world was always right there, not very far away. I could switch gears and move into one and move out of the other very quickly.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Pale. Before I begin this episode, I would like to issue a trigger warning. This is a true crime channel. It's a no holds barred. We will be discussing all things true crime. So if you feel that certain things might trigger you, please think carefully before continuing. This episode and some going forward are going to be looking at possible motive for the brutal slaying of 4 innocent students at their residence 1122 King Road, Musco, Idaho in November 2022. As you may or may not know, Brian Kohberger is the main suspect. He's behind bars awaiting trial. Now, I'm not convinced they've got the right guy at the moment, but I do want to look at the psychology of this crime and see whether we think Brian Kohberger was possibly a serial killer in the making, an incel, or something else. I also will, in future episodes, be looking at other possible suspects and their possible motives. During my investigations, I came across this wonderful interview with none other than Katherine Ramsland, who was Brian Kohberger's criminology professor. Now, we all know that she wrote a book on BTK, the serial killer, aka Dennis Rader. And I came across this phone interview between her and BTK. So I'm going to play clips of that. We're going to look at other serial killers. We're also going to look at the incel movement and see if Brian Kohberger fits any of these. So let's continue. Bear in mind while we're watching these clips that Brian Kohberger will have probably seen the very same clips, learnt the same things as we are learning. And let's see if he applied what he learnt to the crime at 1122 King Road.
You got a job at Cessna, which you loved, right? And then you were laid off. What was that like for you?
Oh, that was a tremendous blow to me. That was what really set me off on going to my first break-in back the day I got laid off.
But why would that? Why would getting laid off get you to the point where you want to break in someone's house?
I think I was just frustrated with the system. I had started on the dark side a long time before that, and the volcano was finally starting to erupt. I wasn't at work at that time. I was probably in that area where the hotels lived, and then saw her and the kids go to school one day. So I thought, well, this might be it. My first fantasy victim would become real. Basically, I just focused on that all the time. I was up in the neighborhood. I checked on that house, one thing after another.
What was your plan? What did you think you were going to do that day?
I had a farm that picked out northwest of Wichita, and I was going to take her and kidnap her probably anger. Just look here, they're going to mess up the whole formula. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was. They have a fence all the way around. I hadn't looked over the side of the fence. All of a sudden, there's dog prints all over the place. Didn't think about that. But I had to do something. I was teed up too much. But about that time, I reached down, took my cutters, and cut the phone line.
Okay, so we can see from this recording with BTK that he had fixated on this one female and he was only focused on that. When he got to the property, he hadn't taken the dog into consideration and the husband was there. He wasn't planning on him being there, but he went ahead anyway. Could that have been what Brian Kohberger had planned all along? He had this focus, he'd stalked the property, he had his eyes on one of the females in the house, and by the time he was teed up so much, he was going ahead anyway. He had a dog and a male, an unexpected male, to deal with. So we can see some parallels, most definitely. However, what is important in this is that BTK's fixation with his victims was bind, torture, kill. So you can see here that he planned to hang his victim. He had a barn in mind. He was going to abduct her. This is all part of a fantasy that every serial killer has. And as we watch further, BTK has a definite fixation with bondage that came from a sexual reaction to his mother getting caught, her hand caught in a sofa, and the fear and struggle in her face turned him on. So while there are parallels, there are distinctive perversions that we can't fail to notice.
And there's the dark side of me. Secret. And that's very strong.
Did you think you would do it again? Did you think it would, that's it, I'm done, it's out of my system? Or did you think
That wasn't there for a while. I guess you call that the cold stage or whatever. And then it starts to build again.
Okay.
Probably it's like a person on a drug. They take a drug and they're high for a while, and then it wears off, and then they're ready to go at it again.
Well, that's interesting because obviously we know that Brian Kohberger had been addicted to heroin, and here we have BTK comparing his murdering with being on a drug. So you can imagine, obviously, serial killers are getting a kick, a big buzz out of this kinky thing that they're doing. They're getting the high, then there's the period of come down and calm, and then they need that buzz again. Yes, a parallel. However, again, I've mentioned it before, there's a kinkiness, there's a perversion to what serial killers are into. When we look at the 1122 King Road murders, as far as we know and what we've been told, there has been no sign of perversion. It seems to be a rage. So that's really important, in my opinion, to keep in mind when we're looking at serial killers.
But she played into some of the magazines I was seeing, criminals going after co-eds and this sort of thing. I saw her one day in her house. I thought, well, this might be all right. I mean, she's coming from somewhere at that time of the day, and I'm in between classes, so that's a possibility.
when you had picked out Catherine Bright, how long did you watch her before you decided to act?
I parked away and watched that address for a while to see whether that was constant. And yeah, she did come home in the afternoon. So I thought, well, all I have to do is break in and be waiting for her when she comes in. So it took probably about a month. She panicked, and I just, out of pure stupidness, I stabbed her. And I didn't like to use a knife. I really did. And then secondly, he ran out of the place. The door was wide open. So I saw him running down the porch and heading out into the road. So it was just total mess.
This is fascinating to me. Now, okay, BTK took a risk with his first victims. He was so revved up he had to go in and do it anyway. But some of those victims were children. Here, he's saying he sized up his next victim. He was obviously revved up again. All I had to do was break in, like it was a, excuse my French, piece of piss, and wait. That's all he had to do. So he obviously does that, and it all goes horribly wrong because he watches someone flee the building. So isn't this interesting if we're comparing Brian Kohberger, the crimes at 1122 King Road, with BTK? BTK had one victim in sight. There was a male in the house. That one male fled. And here we have 4 victims and 2 survivors. No one fled. We're supposed to believe that Brian Kohberger took on 4 adults, having driven around town with his cell phone past all these cameras without watching, without breaking into the house first. He just went on in there on an impulse, took them all on like some dark superhero. I can't get my head around it. And he says, I didn't like to use a knife. I really didn't. Because it wasn't part of the kinkiness that he wanted. He wanted to bind and torture first. You can see it became a panic, and it's, oh my God, I'm going to have to stab her. Okay, yes, maybe that's what happened with the Idaho 4 murders, but there were 4 of them. And there were 2 people in each bedroom that were killed. How did one person against 4 adults do that with 2 survivors who stayed in the house? I'm not buying it. Dennis Rader took underwear and stockings and other trophies from his victims and hid them around his house in what he called his hidey holes. He would take those out, he would go to motel rooms, he would dress in his victims' clothes, and he would recreate bondage situations on himself, photograph it, and keep those photos to kind of feed him in between attacks. He even took a dead victim to the church where he was president of the church council, and there he photographed her body in various bondage situations. He kept all of the photos. Do we get the sense that the murders at the 1122 King Road residence had that motive attached to it? I don't see it. I don't feel that that was the case. I might be wrong, but there doesn't seem to have been any kind of SA, any kind of, well, according to law enforcement, no bondage, no kidnapping, nothing. It was a frenzied stabbing attack, if we are to believe what law enforcement have told us. And I will say, I take what they've told us with a pinch of salt because they can't seem to get their story straight. When BTK got caught, he was driving home and his house was surrounded by cop cars, helicopter. And he says he thought, oh my God, what's this? Could it be for me? A detective approached him and said, you know why we're here? And he pretty much shopped himself in and said, I have an idea. Again, unlike Kohberger, who maintains his innocence to this day. He also knew that the game was up because there was DNA, and he says, you can't fight DNA. He never questioned it. Now, the fact he didn't question it pretty much made him confess. He knew the game was up. He was more concerned at that point that the police had let him down. He thought they had this rapport, and he was quite shocked that they trapped him and even asked them, "Why did you lie to me?" i.e., I trusted you. He forgot himself. He forgot what was going on. The police said, "Because we wanted to catch you." Duh. I find that shocking that he just lost himself so much in the game that he forgot, actually, that they really were trying to catch him. But what he does say is that Vicky Wegeler had DNA under her fingernail because they fought. She fought him. And I find that fascinating that we know that two of the victims at the King Road residence fought back. According to Steve Gonsalves, there was a hell of a fight on the second floor and Kaylee fought back. They had defensive wounds. Was there nothing under their fingernails? I'm thinking there wasn't. Isn't that unusual? We've got the tiniest speck of DNA on a knife sheath that is causing all sorts of problems. Yet two victims who fought back, there's no DNA. Or is there? Because there are 3 unidentified male DNAs that we have only learned about from the defence. If it wasn't for the defence, we would never know about these DNAs, and they have not been investigated. We know that I think at least one of the DNAs was near one of the deceased. Now, we don't know, was this DNA under a fingernail? Was it near a body? Or was it just in the bedroom? But the fact that the police have not even looked into these DNAs is purely shocking to me, and more shocking as we look at stories like BTK. In these sort of, situations and scenarios, shouldn't every avenue be investigated? I want to go back to Vicky Wegeler because 48 Hours has put out an episode in the last couple of days explaining her story. And again, her husband was the main suspect, and wrongly so. The police homed in on him, and he was just living a nightmare for years until it turned out that BTK had murdered his wife. I feel like 48 Hours are putting out some really interesting episodes at the moment. They're not making any comment officially, but their choice of episode release is fascinating because to me, they are saying, you know what, maybe the police haven't got this right because look at all these other cases where they've got it wrong. So I'm going to put the link below about the Vicky Wegeler story, one of BTK's victims, and also look at my community tab because wow, there is an episode there that you really have got to watch. It's not related to the Idaho 4, but it is so relevant. I'm going to be looking at other serial killers to see if we can sort of get a closer match. Yes, there are parallels with BTK. That goes without saying. In that he took some risks. He did get himself into a frenzy where he had to go ahead and couldn't back out. But he had that perversion. He was a pervert. He was rancid. These were sexual attacks, even though there was no RAPE. He was obsessed with bondage and torturing and fear. I just feel that this attack on these 4 students was anger. So I'm going to look at other serial killers, see if we can find some more comparisons. I'm going to look at whether we think Brian Kohberger was an incel. I will say that incels seem to me to be more of a terrorist group, but we'll go into that in greater detail. In the meantime, check out Tommy Jude, Once Upon a Crime Time. He does a great video on Kohberger versus Bundy, and I will see you tomorrow with episode 2. Take care and thank you for watching.
Yeah, you're right. I need it. Sure, you like it.
because I was trying to get you.
When you asked them to tell you if the floppy could be traced, why did you trust them?
I like the scout oath, always be truthful. I just was trustful. But they had declared war on me, and wars are not nice things. I actually felt like they should have given me more respect, I guess, playing their cat and mouse game.
Why did you finally confess during the interrogation?
They talked about the DNA, so nowhere along the line was they going to be able to escape that. So that was the final lane. I was caught with anything else to do, to be honest.